New Year's Day. Lucas let me go back to my parents' house alone. He stayed behind to celebrate the new year with Emily. I was pregnant. On the way, I had an accident. I was rushed to the hospital. I bled profusely and lost the baby. In the hazy redness, I saw Lucas's anxious face in the distance. I tried to get up. All I saw was his back as he and Emily went off to get Botox injections. My heart sank. I quietly hid the pregnancy test report. I decided to keep this a surprise for Lucas forever. Then, I calmly picked up the phone and dialed. "Mom, I'll go back to my parents' house before Valentine's Day. I'll never come back." I had 3 stitches on my forehead. After the operation, I was simply bandaged up. With the doctor's consent, I dragged my tired body home. I pushed open the door. A blast of heat and an unfamiliar perfume hit me in the face. I looked up. Emily was wearing a tight sweater. She was snuggled up against Lucas, wrapped around him like a snake. She saw me come in. She shivered with fear. She fell off the sofa. Lucas looked up in surprise, but he didn't let go of her hand in her panic. The necklace suddenly broke. The pearls scattered everywhere. Lucas panicked. He quickly helped Emily up. He gently touched her neck, which was a little red from the necklace. His eyes are full of worry. "Emily, are you okay? It's all my fault." I walked straight into the bedroom, without looking at them, without showing any emotion on my face. Lucas looks up at me reluctantly and notices the bandage around my head. His eyebrows furrow and immediately asks a bunch of questions. "Why did you come back? I thought you were going to your parents. It's the new year, and you got hurt. Can't you be more careful? My headache is so bad. It feels like a million needles are stabbing me. I really don't want to talk. I just say, 'My head hurts, I'm going to bed.' Then I walk straight into the bedroom without looking back. Is it really that serious? It's just a little injury." Lucas laughs behind me. Emily pouts. She falls into Lucas's arms and says coquettishly, "My neck is all red. Can you blow on it for me?" Lucas quickly rummaged through the drawers and found the first aid kit. He carefully applied the medicine to Emily's neck. I slammed the door shut, keeping their annoying voices out. Exhausted, I collapsed on the bed. I fell asleep quickly. When I woke up, my headache was even worse. It felt like my head was about to split open. My stomach was also growling, but I didn't even have the strength to lift my hand, let alone eat. The room was quiet. There is no one else in the room. I reach for my phone. I turn on the screen. I see a post from Emily's moments a few minutes ago. The 13th year of celebrating Chinese New Year with Lucas. We are still the same. Love, in the photo. Lucas and Emily are holding hands. They are holding a sparkler together. The light from the fireworks illuminates their smiling faces as they look at each other. The dazzling light hurts. I turn off my phone. 11 p.m. Lucas finally returns home. He carried a lunch box into the bedroom. He bent down and whispered in my ear, "Olivia, I'm home late. Emily and my brother insisted on taking me to set off fireworks. You know we celebrate New Year's together every year. I really couldn't refuse, but I brought you a midnight snack. It's red date oatmeal. Get up and eat it." I reluctantly sat up, staring at the bowl of porridge. I felt a pang in my stomach. I casually poured the porridge into the trash can by the bed. Lucas's face immediately turned ugly. He questioned me. "What do you mean by that? You're throwing a temper tantrum again. Can't you learn from Emily and let me worry less?" I sneered. "We've been married for 3 years. We've known each other for 5 years. Don't you know that I'm allergic to red dates yet?" Lucas smiled embarrassedly, whispering, "We men have so many things to worry about. We really can't remember such trivial things." He looked at the bandage on my head. He said casually, "If that's not possible, I'll go back to my parents' house with you for a few days and come back on Valentine's Day." "No need." I firmly disagreed. Lucas said unhappily, "Then you go back by yourself. You're the one who said you didn't need me to go with you." I nodded lightly to show my agreement. I was sure I would go back alone, and after this departure, I would never come back. On the morning of the 3rd day of the 3rd lunar month, I woke up tired in the midst of the noise at Uncle's house. I felt weak. I lay in bed, listening to the sounds coming from the living room. Uncle's voice was loud. "Brother, the 3 of us grew up together. We have a deep bond. It's great that you haven't changed after getting married, but to be honest, you should have married Emily. Olivia is not suitable." It's been 3 years since they got married. Lucas and Emily still don't have a child. Lucas sighed. Pretending to be helpless, he said, "Back then, my career was just getting started. I was afraid that Emily would suffer with me. Olivia is more practical. She helps my career. Pregnancy is a matter of luck." There's nothing she can do if there's no movement in her belly. My heart suddenly felt a sharp shock. It was like being poured with a bucket of cold water from head to toe. The coldness spread throughout my body. Lucas has weak sperm. Over the past 3 years, I have suffered a lot in order to give him a child. Every time I had an egg retrieval, the cold steel needle of the long arm pierced my body. The pain made me break out in cold sweat. My whole body trembled, but I gritted my teeth and got through it, just to be able to give him a child. Unexpectedly, he said it was me who couldn't get pregnant, thinking about all these years, in order to protect Lucas's face. I swallowed all my grievances. I bore it all silently. It's really absurd and ridiculous. I touched my stomach. Yesterday, this place was pregnant with the long-awaited child. Yesterday, I wept bitterly over the loss of him. Now I feel a little relieved. I slowly walked out of the bedroom. Lucas impatiently said, "The guests have already arrived. Go prepare lunch." I looked at him coldly. My tone was firm. "No, let Emily cook for you." Uncle stood by. His face turned white and red. He smiled awkwardly. Lucas immediately said, "Emily just had a facelift yesterday. She shouldn't get too tired today." Just then, the phone suddenly rang, breaking the slightly awkward silence in the room. Lucas answered the phone immediately, pointing at Uncle. He said, "It's Emily calling, asking the 3 of us to go to dinner together." After he finished speaking, they were about to leave. I took out the gold necklace from the dressing table, which was the same as Emily's. It shined faintly in the light. I handed the necklace to Lucas. I said calmly, "I accidentally broke her necklace yesterday, if I'm not mistaken. This is the same model. You can give it to her as compensation. I don't need it anymore. I don't think it's clean." Lucas stopped in his tracks. His face showed surprise. After hesitating for a moment, he reached out and took it. "Okay, Emily really liked this necklace. I heard it's been discontinued. You don't like wearing this kind of jewelry. You bought a whole bunch and just left them there. It's a waste of money," I said coldly. The events of 3 years ago came back to mind. At that time, Lucas and I had just received our marriage certificate. His career had just started. I understood him. I didn't ask for any metalware. I just chose this gold necklace. After marriage, in order to support him, I lived frugally. I only took 3,000 yuan from him each month to support the family. I saved as much as I could to help him save up money to start a business. I even took money from my family to subsidize him. But just yesterday, I saw clearly that Emily's ring and bracelet are from the same series as this necklace. It is obvious that Lucas carefully selected them and gave them to her as a set. I took a deep breath and tried to calm my inner turmoil. Then I handed Lucas all the remaining jewelry on the dresser. Lucas asked with a puzzled expression on his face, "Why do you suddenly no longer want any of it?" I didn't say a word. I thought to myself, I'm going to sell this house. Everything here is filled with too many painful memories. I'm not going to keep any of it. The 8th day of the lunar year, the first day back to work after the spring festival. I walked into the office with mixed feelings. I started packing to prepare to resign. As soon as I entered the office area, I saw a few employees gathered together whispering. I looked up. I realized they were Lucas' distant relatives. "Have you heard? The boss's childhood sweetheart, Emily, is coming to our company today as the general manager. She'll be making millions a year," one of the men whispered, but his tone was full of excitement. "She'll be getting more or less the same treatment as the boss's wife. We have to treat her well. Don't upset her," the other man quickly added. My eyes suddenly became cold. I said coldly, "Anyone who talks nonsense again will pack up and leave immediately." As soon as I had finished speaking, the faces of the men changed. They quickly scattered. I stood there, recalling the past 3 years of marriage. For Lucas's career, I used the resources of my family's connections and spent a lot of money, accompanying him all the way, from the humble studio with less than 10 people at the beginning, slowly developing into a company with nearly 200 people now over the years. I managed all the big and small things of the company, doing the work of a CEO, but I was paid a very low salary. Looking back now, I feel it was really absurd and ridiculous. In the end, after all the hard work, I only held 35% of the shares, just like Lucas, and he carelessly wasted my efforts. He gave everything to his childhood sweetheart. I decided to leave. I found a lawyer and prepared the divorce agreement. I made sure that my premarital assets were safe. Lucas brought Emily to the company. Emily spoke sweetly to Lucas. "Lucas, from now on, you'll have to drive me to and from work every day." Lucas smiled. He gently put an arm around her waist. His tone was gentle. No problem. Leave it to me. Watching them be so affectionate made me reminisce about when we first got married. Every morning, Lucas would smile and serve up breakfast that he had made himself. He would wait until I had finished eating before dragging me out the door. He would drive me to work. The passenger seat was always mine. No one else was allowed to sit there, but I don't know when it started. I haven't been in his car since. It's been more than 2 years. Emily stretched, yawned, lazily said, "It's my first day at work. I'm so sleepy. Olivia, can you get me a cup of coffee?" She deliberately held Lucas's arm tightly. Her eyes looked at me provocatively. "I'm busy." I didn't even look up. I turned around and was about to leave. Lucas shouted at me to stop. "Emily is the new employee at the company. You are now the CEO of the company. Can you be more professional? This is how you treat a new employee." I took a deep breath, struggled to control my inner turmoil, maintained an appearance of calm, turned around and walked towards the pantry. I brewed a cup of instant coffee and handed it to Emily. She took the coffee with a smug look and strode towards her office. Her office was specially arranged by Lucas. It was right next to his office. It's not very big, but there's a door that leads directly into Lucas's office. It's just separated by a wall. Emily looks unhappy. She takes a step back. She takes Lucas's hand and shakes it firmly. "Lucas, I don't like this. I prefer that office. It's big and bright." She points directly at my office. Lucas thinks for a moment, then he makes a decision for me. "Olivia, you'll give up your office to Emily. You'll move over there." He pointed to a small office in the corner. It was cramped, and it didn't have air conditioning. Emily stood nearby, staring at me defiantly. I kept my expression calm, but my tone was cold. "Fine, I don't want the office. I don't want the company. I don't want the shares." Lucas looked surprised. He took a step forward and grabbed my hand. His eyes wide, he asked, "If you don't want any of it, where will you go?" I looked at him coldly, pulled his hand away, and calmly said, "I'm tired. I want to go home and rest after listening to this." Lucas let out a sigh of relief. He looked at my belly and said tenderly, "You have really worked hard these past 3 years. Now it's time to go home and get ready to get pregnant. I hope that this year we can have our own child." I sneered inwardly, but I didn't show it on my face. I just remained silent. Lucas looked at me like this. He thought I had agreed. "Then it's settled. You can start preparing for the handover." I nodded. I said I wanted to take the afternoon off to go to the hospital to change the dressing. Lucas frowned, however. It was not appropriate to take time off work on the first day of the new year. "I will go to the hospital with you after work." Emily listened. She held out her hand in front of Lucas and waved it. She said coquettishly, "Lucas, I'm tired of looking at this manicure. You can go with me to change it this afternoon." Lucas answered cheerfully, "Okay, Olivia, you can go to the hospital by yourself. Emily and I have things to do." Emily looked at me with a smug smile. I went to the hospital alone. The doctor gently changed my dressing. He asked with concern, "You always come alone for dressing changes. You're not married." "Are you?" I laughed. "I'm single." "What's wrong? Are you going to introduce me to a handsome guy?" The doctor suddenly became interested. He slapped his thigh. He laughed. "There's a new PhD trainee in our department who has just graduated. The guy is quite handsome. I'll introduce you." I readily agreed. Perhaps the quickest way to escape my sadness was to start a new relationship. After the dressing change, I quietly waited in the ward. Suddenly, there was a crisp knock on the door. I looked up. Instantly, our eyes met. The man at the door was wearing a clean white lab coat. Under his fine black hair, his eyes were bright like stars. I said softly, "Nathan, it's been a long time. I'm just leaving the hospital. I'm meeting some old friends. They're the production manager of the company's raw material supplier and the packaging supplier." After meeting, I told them about my decision to leave New York City and all the annoying things that had happened to me. After listening, the 3 of them took my side. I said goodbye to each of them. After returning home, I organized the equity transfer contract and waited for Lucas to come back and sign it. Before long, Lucas came in the door. I handed him the stack of contracts. He had just flipped through a few pages when his phone rang. I didn't need to guess who it was. It was Emily. Sure enough, Lucas hastily signed the contract, gave it back to me, and then hugged the phone as he started chatting away. I stood there watching, directing the courier to carry my luggage downstairs, load it into the car, and take it away. It wasn't until the luggage had all been carried away. Lucas didn't react until then. With a puzzled look on his face, he asked, Why are you bringing so much stuff back to your parents' house? Well, I'll be staying there for a while. Lucas nodded casually. That's fine. Tomorrow, Emily and I are going on a trip. It'll probably last half a month. Early the next morning, Lucas left with his suitcase. As soon as he was gone, I brought the real estate agent to look at the house. Within 3 days, the house was successfully sold. After the $5 million sale proceeds and $50 million in equity cash arrived, I knew it was time to go. I took out my phone and sent Lucas a WeChat message. Let's break up. Then, I decisively blocked him, completely ending the relationship. I rushed to the airport. From a distance, I saw Nathan standing straight. He had been waiting there for a long time. When he saw me approaching, he gave a happy smile and whispered, "The residency is over. I have to go back to Chicago to work in the hospital. I'm so lucky to have met you in New York City." I nodded with a smile. Yes, we haven't seen each other since college. It was really lucky to bump into each other this time. Then, we got on the plane home together, starting a new life. Lucas saw the WeChat message I sent. He looked surprised. He wanted to ask me what was going on, but he found out that I had been blocked. There was just a row of red exclamation marks. Emily glanced at his phone. With a strange tone, she said, "Lucas, Olivia must be jealous. They are both women. I can tell at a glance that she is playing tricks. Don't take it to heart." After hearing her words, Lucas's brows relaxed. He gently pinched Emily's cheek. "You're right. It's probably because she saw me only take you out on a trip. She's a little upset. When I go back, I'll buy her a bag. Just coax her." After that, the two of them laughed and hugged. Half a month later, Lucas dragged his suitcase to the front door. He used his finger to scan his fingerprint as usual, but he heard the alarm sound. The fingerprint verification failed. He frowned. He entered the password again, but it still showed an error. Suddenly, the door opened. A burly, muscular man poked his head out. He asked sternly, "Who is it?" His eyes were sharp, like a knife, and scanned Lucas. Lucas unconsciously shrunk his neck. Gathering his courage, he asked loudly, "Who are you? Why are you in my house?" Upon hearing this, the muscular man's eyebrows shot up. "Who says this is your house? It's my house now. You're the previous tenant, right? You haven't even taken your things with you. Get rid of that bag of crap and stop loitering here." After saying this, he raised his hand and flung it, and threw a handbag. Documents fell out, spilling them all over the floor. Then, with a bang, the door slammed shut. Lucas froze in place. It took a long time for him to come to his senses. He picked up one of the documents lying nearby. As soon as he read it, his face immediately turned pale. He slumped down onto the floor in a state of weakness. It was my pregnancy test and abortion record. Lucas's eyes fixed on the words. Each word was like a knife, stabbing deep into his heart. His face suddenly turned pale. His lips trembled. His heart felt like it was being stabbed by countless needles. It turned out that he had had a child. It was on New Year's Day. If he had not accompanied Emily that day, but had driven her back to her parents' house, then nothing would have happened to the child. Remorse engulfed him like a flood. Emily walked quickly over, her high heels clicking on the ground. She glimpsed the medical records in Lucas' hands. The corner of her mouth rose slightly, revealing a trace of barely perceptible joy. But quickly, she put on a sympathetic face again, gently placing a hand on Lucas' shoulder. She said tenderly, "You can have more children. Don't be too sad. If it doesn't work, I'll give birth to another one for you." Lucas' eyes were red. He almost shouted out of control. Yes, we can have children in the future. You just have to try the test tube. Just like Olivia did for 3 years. We can definitely have another child." The veins on his neck stood out. His voice echoed in the hallway. It was full of despair and stubbornness. Emily heard it. Her eyes widened in surprise. Her gaze fell on Lucas's weak sperm test report. She froze, her lips trembled. She whispered, "We'll talk about the baby later." Lucas immediately flew into a rage. He raised his hand and slapped her. He yelled, "I have done so much for you, but you are not even willing to do such a simple thing. You don't want to give me a child." After saying that, he was deflated. He slapped himself hard. He was full of self-blame. "Olivia, I am sorry. I am also sorry for the child." Chicago. The afternoon sun lazily shone in the window. I'm curled up on the sofa. I'm about to close my eyes and take a nap. Suddenly, my phone starts beeping. I frown. I pick it up and look at the screen. Luca's name keeps popping up. One friend request after another keeps popping up. "Olivia, I was wrong. I'm sorry. I'll make it up to you when you get back." My eyes ache from reading those words. All the pain from the past comes flooding back. I took a deep breath. I might as well not read it. I turned off the screen before long. The phone vibrated again. It was him. He kept sending friend requests. It was as if he wouldn't stop until he got a reply. You can hit me and scold me. Just don't ignore me. When I saw this message, I thought it was ridiculous. My heart filled with anger. My eyes became cold. Without hesitation, I pressed the power button. The phone screen immediately went black. The next day, after I announced my resignation from the company, raw material suppliers and factory managers canceled their cooperation with the company one after the other. Lucas and Emily were desperate. Emily wanted to be a lobbyist, trying to salvage those collaborations. She had exquisite makeup on her face. She smiled sweetly. Her voice was gentle as she spoke to the supplier. But the other party repeatedly coldly refused. The supplier said bluntly, with a cold tone, "We have always supported your company at the lowest price because of our friendship with Olivia. This friendship Lucas cannot compare to. You are not comparable to it either." Emily's face suddenly turned red, but she endured it. She did not dare offend a supplier with whom she had cooperated for many years. After learning about this, Lucas stormed into the office angrily. His hand trembled as he pointed at Emily and yelled, "You useless thing. You can't even handle this little thing." He was spitting out his anger. His eyes were wide, but I had nothing to do with all this trouble. The Chicago wind blew gently across my face. It had a familiar smell. Nathan and I were walking along the tree-lined path on the university campus. We were reminiscing about the past. Back then, I was a sophomore. He was a junior. I studied finance. He studied medicine. We both joined the skateboarding club. Those 2 years, every night, the skate park was brightly lit. Everyone had a great time. There was non-stop laughter. Nathan and I worked really well together. The skateboards spun nimbly beneath our feet. The wind from our ride gently blew our hair. But by our senior year, things slowly started to change. Lucas started to pursue me. He was very attentive. Nathan was busy preparing for graduate school. He was always in the lab. Our contact became less frequent. When we did run into each other, we just exchanged brief greetings. Under Lucas's intense pursuit, the young me slowly fell in love and finally agreed to be with him. After graduation, on impulse, I followed him to New York City and immediately got married and started a business. That was it. My fate with Nathan was cut short, wasting so many years. But people who are meant to be will meet again. The sun shone gently on the bench by the roadside. Nathan sat next to me, carefully examining my forehead. His eyes were full of joy. "The scar on your forehead is completely gone." After saying that, he looked at me lovingly. He bowed his head slightly and gave me a soft kiss on my forehead. Just then, a voice full of resentment broke the peace. "Olivia, you've gone too far." I saw Lucas standing not far away. His face was ugly. He rushed towards me. Nathan immediately stood up. He stood in front of me and grabbed Lucas's hand. He twisted it hard. Lucas let out a yelp of pain. His eyes were wide with anger. He stared at Nathan and asked, "Who are you?" Nathan stood in front of me and said, "I'm her boyfriend. Don't bother her again." Lucas was furious like a mad dog. He yelled at me, "How can you be so shameless?" I looked at him coldly and asked, "In return, I'm shameless. You're no better. You and Emily do that in front of me every day. It's really unbearable." He was at a loss for words. His lips moved, but not a word came out for a long time. He calmed down and urged me again, "Come back to New York City with me quickly. Contact those suppliers and factory managers immediately. Deal with this matter." I smiled coldly and firmly refused. "I sold all my shares to you and Emily. I have nothing to do with the company anymore." His eyes bulged. He looked incredulous. He shouted, "We are married. The company is also marital property. You can't just walk away from it." I calmly took out the divorce agreement from my bag. I waved it in front of him. "Take a good look. We have been divorced for a long time." Lucas snatched the agreement. He saw his own signature. His voice changed. "I never signed it. This document is a forgery. It is invalid." I looked calm. I revealed the truth in a cold tone. "The agreement was tucked inside the share transfer contract. Don't you know what you signed?" He panicked. He fell to his knees in front of me. He grabbed my clothes tightly. He kept begging me, "Olivia, please come back with me. I and the company can't do without you." I looked disgusted. I shook his outstretched hand off. "Forget it. I'm not going back." He begged me again in a low voice. "Olivia, have you forgotten our old friendship? If you come back, I'll spend less time with Emily. I'll stay at home with you every day." I sneered. I thought this was the most ridiculous thing in the world. I stared at him coldly. Lucas, I don't care anymore. I have a new life now. You're already a part of the past. Don't bother me anymore. After saying that, I turned my head and gave Nathan a wink, asking him to help get rid of this person. Lucas saw this and said, unconvinced, fine. Olivia, the company will continue to operate without you. After that, he turned and left. Lucas returned to New York City. He rushed around, smiling and greeting people, going out of his way to finally find a new supplier and production plant at 3 times the price before he reluctantly found a new supplier and production plant. Time was running out. The construction period was delayed. As a result, a batch of key products could not be supplied on time. The client's lawyers kept sending letters. The huge amount of compensation for breach of contract put Lucas under a lot of pressure. I heard about Lucas's predicament from a friend. I felt particularly happy. My wedding with Nathan was scheduled for 3 months later. The sun shone in through the window of the bridal shop. It fell on my white wedding dress. I stood in front of the mirror, wearing a mermaid wedding dress. The slim fit shows off my figure perfectly. Nathan is standing next to me. His eyes are full of love and tenderness. He comes over to me, gently straightens the veil on my shoulders, and says tenderly, Olivia, you're so beautiful, just like the bride in my dreams. My face gets a little hot, and my heart fills with sweetness. Suddenly, the shop door is slammed open with a crash and broke the warmth. It was Lucas again. His hair was a mess. He hadn't shaved. His eyes were red. He staggered in. As soon as he saw me, he bent down and grabbed my skirt. He pleaded, Olivia, please come back to New York City with me. Let's start over, have a baby, live a good life. Hearing these words, I felt like I'd been struck by lightning. All the painful memories of the past 3 years came flooding back. I'd endured countless desperate days and nights in the hope of giving him a child. But all my hopes had been dashed. I felt like such a fool. Before I could say anything, Emily stormed in. Her makeup was smudged, her eyes full of anger. She rushed over to Lucas and grabbed him. Lucas, you promised to go with me to get married today. How could you go to Chicago? What do you mean? Do you still want to get married? Lucas shook her hand off. He shouted at her, the only person I've ever loved is Olivia. Emily listened. It was as if she had heard something unbelievable. Her eyes widened. She was shaking with anger. Lucas, make your own decision. If you choose Olivia, I promise I will never bother you again. Lucas was so angry that he lost his temper. He raised his hand and slapped Emily hard across the face. He shouted, go away. Don't mess things up here. Emily covered her face with her hands. Her eyes were red. She turned around and ran away, crying. Then Lucas turned to me again. He continued to beg. I watched this farce. My anger suddenly flared up. I raised my hand and slapped him several times. The sound of the slap echoed through the store. I said slowly, the woman got a slap. The man got a harder slap. You should go too. We broke up a long time ago. Lucas covered his face with his hands. Tears glistened in his eyes. Olivia, I won't give up. I will make you change your mind. After he said that, he slowly got up and left in a daze. I took a deep breath and leaned into Nathan's arms. He patted my back gently to comfort me. I never thought Lucas would stay in Chicago. The next day, I fell ill. I slowly woke up in bed. My head was spinning. I felt weak all over. Nathan was sitting by the bed. He saw I was awake. His eyes were full of concern. He asked me in a low voice, "Are you hungry? I'll go get you something to eat." Lucas appeared at the door of the hospital room not long after Nathan had left. He was carrying a thermos in his hand. His hair was still messy. He entered the room and walked straight to the bed. He opened the lunchbox. The aroma of the food immediately wafted out. "I made your favorite. Have some. Your body will recover quickly." I glanced at the food on the table. My attention was drawn to the shredded potatoes. Memories from 3 years ago suddenly flooded back. When we first got married, Lucas couldn't even hold a knife properly. He was so clumsy, but he wanted to make me happy. He insisted on cooking for me himself while cutting the potatoes. He accidentally cut his finger with the knife. Blood immediately flowed. He frowned in pain, but he still smiled and said it didn't matter. I shook my head. I drove those warm memories out of my head. I felt really ridiculous. Now the shredded potatoes are thin and even. His hands must have added new injuries. I looked up at Lucas's hands. Sure enough, there were a few new cuts on the fingertips. They were still bleeding. Lucas noticed that I was looking at him. Unconsciously, he put his hand behind his back. He forced a smile. "It's fine as long as you like it. What do you want to eat tomorrow? I'll cook it for you." I looked at him coldly. My tone was cold. Lucas, it's too late over the next few months. Lucas seemed determined to stay in Chicago. Every morning, he would wait for me downstairs on time, driving me to work. In the evening, he would wait early in front of the company to pick me up. He would also hand me a dinner he had cooked himself. When it got cold, he would hurry over with a heavy coat. He would drape it over my shoulders to remind me not to catch a cold. In the summer, when the sun was scorching, he would again sweat as he handed me cold drinks just to cool me down. For a moment, I felt a little dazed. It felt as if the pain of the past 3 years was an unreal nightmare. Sometimes, the sudden pain in my lower abdomen would bring me back to reality, reminding me that a little life had once been growing there, that those experiences were real. Soon it was the day of the wedding. The crystal chandelier cast a fine, shimmering light. The whole venue was as beautiful as a dream. I wore a white wedding dress. Nathan wore a sharp suit. We held hands, with happy smiles on our faces. We walked step by step towards the wedding stage. The audience was packed. Applause and well wishes mingled together. Suddenly, there was a commotion in the crowd. Lucas rushed out. With a thud, he dropped to his knees in front of everyone. He held a ring in his hand. Tears flowed unstoppably. He didn't care about the strange looks from the people around him. He pleaded, "Olivia, please give me another chance, marry me." The guests were all surprised. There were continuous exclamations of shock. I continued walking. My high heels made a determined sound on the ground. I looked him straight in the eye. I said firmly, "Lucas, I will never forgive you in this life. It's completely over between us." After that, I took Nathan's arm firmly. I walked on without looking back. Lucas slumped to the ground. His eyes were vacant. Tears flowed unstoppably. There was a burst of laughter around me. A young man gave a disgusted face. With disgust, "This person is really ridiculous. Don't even look at what you look like. It's time to come and make trouble. Yes, look at this appearance. Dare to compete with Nathan's handsome guy. It's really presumptuous." A lady laughed with her hands covering her mouth. Her tone was full of sarcasm. I frowned. "Call the security guard, take him out. Don't affect everyone's mood." The security guard moved skillfully, quickly stepped forward. One on each side, they helped Lucas up. He looked like a lost soul. Slowly, he stood up. Step by step, he walked unsteadily out of the stadium. The next day, Lucas sadly left Chicago. 6 months later, I was comfortably lying on the sofa, talking to my best friend in New York City on the phone. As soon as the call connected, my best friend excitedly said, "Lucas died." "That's great." I froze for a moment. Then I asked, "What happened?" My friend started talking nonstop. After Lucas returned to Chicago, he changed completely. He looked sickly. He couldn't eat every day. In the end, he developed stomach cancer due to chronic depression. At the company, Emily walked around the various offices in a high and mighty manner. The business that Lucas and I had worked so hard to build together was now completely under her control. Lucas was penniless. The illness made it difficult for him to even stand. When he had no other choice, he had to give up his last shred of dignity. He went to see Emily. He looked at Emily, who had once been so close to him. His lips trembled. His voice was very soft. "Emily, considering our past relationship, can you lend me some money for medical treatment?" Emily's face suddenly turned pale. She raised her hand and slapped him hard. Her eyes were full of hatred and indifference. "From the day you chose Olivia, our relationship was over. We're through. You can do what you want. Don't count on me." Lucas ended up on the streets. He couldn't afford treatment. He died in despair. On the other side of the street, Emily continued to run the company, but she didn't have any real skills. She wasted connections. She made bad decisions. The company's accounts showed more and more losses. In the end, the company had to close. After losing her support, she was completely lost. For money, she became a professional mistress. She changed 4 or 5 sugar daddies. As a result, she contracted an STD. Now no one dares to approach her. Listening to my best friend's vivid description, I felt a burst of joy. After hanging up the phone, I turned to look at Nathan next to me, who was looking at me tenderly. He gently took my hand. His eyes were full of love and care. We smiled at each other. No need to speak. We both understood that our current happiness was hard-won. We must cherish it.